Nathan Reed opened the DNA test results at exactly 8:14 p.m. By 8:29, he had vanished without a trace. Alicia Monroe claimed he walked out on his family in silence, but investigators would soon uncover a chilling web of lies, betrayal. He kept a tidy routine, paid his bills on time, and stayed out of unnecessary drama. People at work called him dependable, even boring. The baby was only 4 months old when Nathan disappeared. Friends said Nathan was thrilled to become a father. He posted pictures of Caleb wrapped in a blue blanket, smiling in his arms. According to Alicia, they were both home that night. His wallet and keys were missing, but his laptop was left open on the couch. There was no sign of forced entry or violence in the house. His car was not parked on the street, and none of the neighbors had seen or heard anything. Traffic cameras near the neighborhood didn't capture his vehicle leaving. His phone hadn't pinged any towers since the night before. It was as if Nathan had disappeared into thin air. They checked his bank accounts and credit cards. None had been used since the night of his disappearance. His social media accounts were untouched. His phone, which had always been tracked to within feet, had gone dark at exactly 8:29 p.m., 15 minutes after the email came through. She checked the email, hoping for a clue, but it was locked behind a password she didn't know. Most people who vanish leave something behind: a note, a signal, a breadcrumb trail. Others were convinced she was just another devastated partner left behind with a child. Alicia resumed her job part-time and raised Caleb on her own. The timing, the silence, and above all, the results of that paternity test seen only by Nathan and then forever lost. Whatever truth was in that file, it was powerful enough to make a man vanish, and for now, that truth remained buried. She gave few updates and eventually stopped responding to media inquiries. Nathan S. name faded from headlines and his photo joined the long list of unresolved missing persons cases. She gave interviews, sometimes with tears in her eyes, other times looking strangely composed. When asked about the paternity test, she repeated that Nathan had requested it on his own. She didn't know why, and she wished she had pushed him to talk more about what was bothering him. Nathan left nothing. His friends insisted he wasn't the type to run away. Some online forums claimed Nathan had faked his disappearance. Others believed he had uncovered something shocking in the DNA results, something that made him leave without a word. The keys were still in the ignition. The seats were clean. No fingerprints other than Nathan's were found. Inside the glove box was a receipt for gas dated 2 hours before the email had arrived. Investigators were puzzled. It was as though Nathan had planned his disappearance in advance. But if he had, why leave everything behind? Why leave a child he had so proudly welcomed into the world? Conspiracy theories formed quickly. A secret second family, hidden debts, even connections to criminal activity. But the police found no evidence supporting any of them. He loved his job, loved Alicia, and especially loved Caleb. His co-workers said he'd been stressed lately, but nothing alarming. Just tired, distracted, maybe adjusting to fatherhood like anyone else would. She told them about the test, reluctantly, unsure whether it was relevant. But as soon as the words paternity test were mentioned, the investigation took a sharp turn. At 7 a.m. the next morning, she called his office, pretending to be calm. When they said he hadn't shown up, she filed a missing person report. She was giving Caleb a bath while Nathan sat in the living room, scrolling through his laptop. She said she didn't hear anything unusual, no arguments, no yelling, nothing thrown or broken. But when she came back to the living room, Nathan was gone. At first, she thought he might have stepped out for air. Then maybe a quick drive, but hours passed. By midnight, she began to panic, and added captions like, "Best thing that ever happened to me." But if anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed a change in him in the weeks after the baby was born. Nathan had become quieter, more distracted. His eyes, once calm and focused, often drifted as if he were deep in thought or carrying a weight he couldn't share. When they accessed his email, they found the message that had arrived at 8:14 p.m. on Sunday evening. The subject line read, "Your DNA results are in." The email had been opened. The attachment had been downloaded. But there was no sign of what he saw, no printouts, no copies, no files on the computer. Just that single timestamp and a silent gap afterward. He wasn't flashy or overly social, but he was kind in a quiet way, The kind of man who never missed a birthday or forgot to bring coffee to morning meetings. Alicia said she didn't understand why he wanted one. She claimed he brought it up out of nowhere one evening, insisting it wasn't tea because he doubted her but because he just wanted to be sure. She said she agreed reluctantly, hoping it would put whatever fears he had to rest. They had the test done at a private clinic downtown, one Nathan had researched himself. He was meticulous like that. He always double-checked everything, even things most people would overlook. He lived in a modest two-bedroom home in the suburbs of Marietta, Georgia, with his longtime girlfriend, Alicia Monroe. They had met in college, drifted apart, then reconnected after graduation. After nearly a decade together, they seemed as stable as any couple could be without a wedding ring. And a secret so explosive it was enough to make a man disappear forever. Nathan Reed had always been the kind of man who never caused trouble. Alicia had recently given birth to their son, Caleb. No one knew about the paternity test, not his coworkers, not his friends, not even his family. The results were scheduled to arrive by email on Sunday evening. His phone went straight to voicemail. Police arrived quickly and began their initial checks. Detectives interviewed Alicia at length. They asked about their relationship, about whether Nathan had seemed depressed or anxious lately. They obtained a search warrant for Nathan's laptop and managed to crack his password. That was the last confirmed digital footprint of Nathan Reed. The investigation widened quickly. Police canvassed local hospitals, shelters, and bus stations. What troubled investigators most was how clean the disappearance was. Alicia became the focal point of public interest. Some speculated that she had something to do with Nathan's disappearance. Rumors spread fast. His car was eventually found 3 days later, abandoned in the parking lot of a closed strip mall 30 miles outside of town. Weeks turned into months. The case remained open, but no new leads emerged. But one thing never sat right with the lead detective. 2 weeks after Nathan Reed's disappearance, the case had grown cold. The initial search had yielded nothing but dead ends. His car was found, but it told no story. His digital trail went dark within minutes of opening that crucial email. What she found was not criminal, but it did raise questions. Caleb sat in a baby bouncer in the corner, kicking his legs softly, unaware of the chaos that surrounded his family. She left the house with more suspicion than when she arrived. Alicia claimed she still hadn't seen the test results and insisted she had no idea what they said. But on his browser history, cloud backups, and old documents, they discovered that 2 weeks prior to receiving the paternity test results, Nathan had downloaded a PDF file about legal parental rights. A few days after that, he searched terms like, "What if DNA test proves I'm not the father?" And, "Can I still be responsible for child support?" But she asked again if Alicia had known Nathan wasn't the father. Alicia's response was flat. With no known family, they started digging through past addresses and phone records. Many were deleted, but the remaining ones hinted at something deeper than casual friendship. There were long calls late at night. There were brief texts during the day when Nathan would have been at work. They found encrypted chats with a contact labeled only as D. They tracked him to a small town in Mississippi where he was working under a new name for a roofing company. Local police were alerted and Daniel was brought in for questioning. At first, he denied any involvement, claiming he hadn't spoken to Alicia in weeks. But after being shown the message logs and phone records, he changed his story. He admitted to being in a relationship with Alicia, but insisted he had nothing to do with Nathan's disappearance. He said Alicia told him Nathan had left after an argument, that he had walked out and never returned. The contents were limited, but one phrase stood out: "He knows. We need to figure it out fast." There was no body, no crime scene, no confession. But for Detective Hartman, the truth was inching closer. She believed Nathan had confronted Alicia. She believed Alicia had panicked. And she believed Daniel had helped her cover something up. The message was sent less than 10 minutes after the email with the DNA results was opened. And still, the biggest question remained: where was Nathan Reed? Alicia had told everyone she was committed to Nathan, but her digital trail suggested otherwise. Eventually, they uncovered a name that showed up repeatedly in her phone logs over the past year: Daniel Mercer. What happened next was still unknown, but it was becoming increasingly likely that Nathan hadn't left willingly. The possibility of foul play, once remote, now moved to the center of the case. A quick check revealed that Daniel had lived just 5 miles away from Alicia and Nathan for nearly a year. He worked construction and had a minor criminal record, mostly small offenses, nothing violent. What caught their attention was that Daniel had recently moved out of state, just 2 days after Nathan went missing. She looked at the document without emotion and simply said she didn't know. She claimed she had no idea who else could be the father and refused to speculate. These weren't the questions of a man who was casually curious. These were the signs of someone preparing for bad news. She didn't know Nathan's email password and said she had no reason to believe he would fake his disappearance. The account had been created under a fake name, and it was tied to only 2 things: the clinic that handled the paternity test and the secured file-sharing site. That site contained a single uploaded document. Investigators attempted to retrieve the file, but it had been deleted. All that remained was the file name, Caleb_test_confirmed PDF. When asked about their relationship, she repeated what she had said before, that they were happy, that they had some stress after the baby came, but nothing serious. Alicia had moved multiple times over the past 10 years, sometimes abruptly. It took nearly a week, but finally, a judge granted access on the grounds of a missing person investigation. She had attended college in Atlanta but didn't graduate. Nathan Reed was not the biological father of Caleb Monroe. The probability of paternity was 0%. It was a stunning blow to the image of a perfect suburban family, but it still didn't explain everything. Men have walked away from families after learning the same. Some leave notes, some disappear in anger, but rarely without a trace. Nathan was methodical, rational. Something more had to have happened. She had a pattern of unstable employment, and most interestingly, she had no close relatives listed anywhere. No parents, no siblings, no extended family. Her life before Nathan was largely undocumented. No old social media, no former roommates, no high school friends. It wasn't proof of wrongdoing, but it was unusual. And the one person who might have known the reason Alicia Monroe was either just as lost as the rest, or was keeping something close to her chest. Investigators were torn. There was no evidence of a crime, but there was also no evidence of a voluntary disappearance. It was as if a man had simply evaporated from his own life. Detective Lena Hartman couldn't let it go. She had worked dozens of missing persons cases in her 15-year career, but something about this one felt different. Nathan didn't fit the profile of someone who would just walk away. There were no secret accounts, no travel plans, no emotional breakdowns. He had made a life for himself. He had a family. He had responsibilities. Yet the moment he learned the results of a paternity test, he vanished without a trace. Digging deeper, Lena requested a full background review of Alicia Monroe. Lena paid Alicia another visit. Alicia was quieter than before, guarded. But Lena noticed the slight hesitation in her voice, the half-second delays before answering certain questions. Meanwhile, forensic analysts combed through Nathan's devices again. This time, they focused not just on his email, they also found that Nathan had accessed a burner email account on the same laptop. That was the first undeniable proof that Nathan had seen the results. But what did they confirm? It wasn't hard to guess. Detective Hartman contacted the clinic directly and requested the test results. But due to privacy laws, the clinic refused to release the information without a court order. The results arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. The test confirmed what Lena had already suspected. Lena returned to Alicia with the results in hand. She didn't accuse her of anything outright, but behind the scenes, investigators began looking at Alicia's past relationships. Detective Hartman requested a subpoena for Alicia's phone records and found that she had exchanged dozens of messages with Daniel in the months leading up to Nathan's disappearance. The pieces were beginning to form a clearer picture. Nathan had suspected something. He'd requested the test. He had likely confronted Alicia after seeing the results. Police issued a warrant for Alicia's devices, including her phone, tablet, and cloud accounts. At this point, investigators turned their attention to Daniel Mercer. It wasn't enough. What had started as a simple paternity test had unraveled a dark thread of lies, betrayal, and possible murder. 2 months after Nathan Reed vanished, the case was no longer just about a missing person. What began as a quiet disappearance had turned into a tangled investigation involving deceit, a secret affair, and the unmistakable shadow of foul play. But even as suspicion circled Alicia Monroe and Daniel Mercer, police still lacked the single most crucial piece of evidence: a body. Without it, there was no crime scene, no cause of death, and no way to prove definitively that Nathan hadn't simply fled. Yet every detail investigators uncovered continued to suggest otherwise. A specialized team returned to the house with luminol, searching for traces of blood invisible to the naked eye. After several hours, they found faint traces on the garage floor and on a tarp folded beneath some old boxes. Lab analysis confirmed it was human blood, and DNA matched Nathan Reed. It wasn't a large amount, but it was enough to indicate an injury had taken place there. Detective Lena Hartman pushed harder. The case now moved firmly into the realm of homicide. He claimed he had gone to the house that night after Alicia called him. She claimed Daniel was lying to protect himself and that she had no idea what had happened in the garage. She said Nathan was already gone when she walked out of the house. She implied that Daniel might have acted alone out of jealousy or some twisted desire to solve her problem. In the meantime, Caleb was placed in the care of a foster family. Without a body, closure was impossible. The garage told part of the story, the landfill another. But until Nathan himself was found, his fate remained a chilling mystery hovering over the entire town. Alicia's parental rights were suspended. The court ruled it wasn't safe or appropriate for her to retain custody during the investigation. Public opinion was divided. Some believed Alicia was a victim of circumstance. Others believed she was the orchestrator of a calculated plan to rid herself of a man who had discovered the truth. According to him, Nathan had confronted her with the DNA results. Prosecutors believed Daniel's story more, if only because it matched the evidence: the blood in the garage, the black bags in the landfill, the truck spotted outside the house, the cover-up effort. But the lack of a body still complicated everything. The argument escalated. Daniel said he arrived during the tail end of the fight. He claimed Alicia had shoved Nathan in the garage and that Nathan had slipped and hit his head. Daniel insisted it was an accident, but he admitted they had panicked and covered it up. He described how they wrapped the body in a tarp, loaded it into his truck, and drove to the landfill before sunrise. The district attorney's office considered it strong circumstantial evidence. With the DNA match and the landfill connection, a grand jury approved charges against Alicia Monroe and Daniel Mercer. They were both arrested on suspicion of conspiracy and murder. Nathan's body had not been recovered. No medical examiner had declared a cause of death. They said the blood could have come from an old injury or a staged scene. They argued Daniel confessed under pressure and pointed the finger to save himself. Alicia's lawyers maintained her innocence, portraying her as a single mother caught in a nightmare she didn't create. The presence of the tarp raised new questions. Had Alicia and Daniel used it to move Nathan's body? She insisted Nathan left on his own after seeing the paternity results. A local landfill 25 miles from Alicia's neighborhood reported an incident that had occurred the day after Nathan's disappearance. A worker remembered seeing a black pickup truck arrive just after sunrise. The driver dumped several large black bags and drove off quickly. The security footage from the entrance was blurry and partially obstructed, but the vehicle appeared consistent with Daniel's truck. No one had connected it to anything suspicious at the time. She said he had been quiet, even cold, but never violent. It was an enormous task, but with the timeline narrowing, they focused on a specific quadrant. After 4 days of digging through mountains of trash and debris, searchers recovered remnants of black plastic bags and what appeared to be fabric soaked in dried blood. Forensic tests confirmed the blood was Nathan's. A shred of shirt fabric matched what Nathan had been wearing the day he vanished. She denied ever asking Daniel to come over and said she didn't know why he would have been parked outside the house. Had something gone wrong in the garage during a confrontation? Without security cameras, no one could say for sure what had happened. But detectives were growing more certain that Nathan hadn't left the house alive. She believed the truth was buried beneath calculated lies and half-confessions. She revisited the timeline, re-examined the forensics, and interviewed neighbors one more time. One elderly neighbor, who had previously claimed to have seen nothing, now remembered a strange detail. On the night Nathan disappeared, she had seen a dark pickup truck idling outside the Reed Monroe residence around 9 p.m. It stayed parked for a few minutes and then drove off slowly, headlights off. She didn't think much of it at the time, but now she believed it was unusual enough to report. Detectives traced the truck back to Daniel Mercer. Records showed he owned a black Ford F-150 registered in his name during the time he lived in Georgia. Security footage from a traffic camera placed his truck less than half a mile from Nathan S. house the same night Nathan disappeared. Confronted with this evidence, Daniel admitted he had been in the area that evening but claimed he was just checking on Alicia because she seemed emotional earlier that day. He insisted Nathan was already gone when he arrived. According to him, Alicia had called and said they had argued and she was scared. But phone logs contradicted that claim. Alicia hadn't called Daniel until well after 8:30 p.m., around the time Nathan's phone had stopped pinging any towers. It wasn't a frantic call for help, it lasted just over a minute. That short window became more significant the deeper Lena dug. The house showed no signs of a struggle. No blood, no broken furniture, no evidence of violence. But it also hadn't been forensically examined the way it would have been if investigators had suspected foul play from the start. Lena pushed for a full forensic re-examination of the property. It was granted. The garage now became the suspected scene of the incident. Still, the challenge remained. There was no body, and both Alicia and Daniel maintained their denial. When questioned again, Alicia stuck to her story. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected angle. Detectives secured a warrant to begin searching the landfill section that matched the date and location. It still wasn't a body, but the discovery shifted everything. During interrogation, Daniel broke first. Faced with the possibility of life in prison, he offered a partial confession. But Alicia's version, when confronted with Daniel's confession, was different. She denied any physical altercation. Both accounts were murky, self-serving, and filled with inconsistencies. The defense team argued there was no proof of death-only assumptions. The case was scheduled to go to trial in early spring. And yet, amid the noise and headlines, one question still haunted everyone: where was Nathan Reed? As winter closed in, the small Georgia town remained unsettled by the unanswered questions surrounding Nathan Reed's disappearance. The news of Alicia Monroe and Daniel Mercer's arrest had ignited a firestorm of speculation. Neighbors who once smiled at the couple now whispered about murder. Online forums flooded with theories, dissecting every detail of the case. Some were convinced the whole story was an accident turned cover-up. Others believed Alicia had manipulated Daniel into committing murder. They were seen on camera at 6:47 a.m., Daniel pumping gas while Alicia sat in the passenger seat. They pointed out that no murder weapon was found, and the bloodstains in the garage were small, not enough, they claimed, to prove a fatal injury. They painted Daniel as a man caught in Alicia's web, manipulated by a woman desperate to cover her secrets. Alicia's defense leaned into maternal sympathy. She was a new mother, overwhelmed, abandoned by a man who couldn't accept the truth. 2 men. 2 paternity tests, 2 disappearances. The similarities were no longer a coincidence. And while the evidence was growing, so was the pressure to deliver a verdict that would hold. She had never lifted a finger to harm Nathan, they said. She had only tried to move forward. And the longer that truth stayed buried, the more Alicia's quiet smile seemed like a warning that the story wasn't over yet. Inside, among piles of unused baby items and furniture, investigators found a sealed box marked with duct tape. When opened, it revealed several personal belongings: photos of Alicia and Joel, a framed sonogram, and a burner phone. On that phone were text messages between Alicia and an unknown number. Some of the messages referenced starting fresh and not letting things fall apart like last time. The investigation had uncovered deception, betrayal, and a dark pattern in Alicia's past. But even with all of it, she knew the question everyone in the courtroom would ask: where is Nathan Reed? Others mentioned making sure he doesn't find out. The phone's activity stopped abruptly days after Joel vanished. Neither mentioned this trip during their initial interviews. When asked about it now, they claimed they were going for coffee and air. The court didn't buy it. The messages were brought into the Georgia case as evidence to show motive and behavior. Prosecutors now had grounds to suggest Alicia may have been involved in more than one disappearance. Although Joel's body was never found either, the pattern lent weight to the current charges. But again, suspicion alone wasn't enough. The prosecution unveiled their theory. Nathan had discovered the truth about Caleb's paternity and confronted Alicia. Fearing the collapse of her carefully constructed life, she involved Daniel, who was already emotionally invested. Together, they either killed Nathan or allowed him to die during a confrontation. They disposed of his body and covered up the crime. When evidence began to mount, they turned on each other, but neither could hide the truth completely. But the most persistent theory, the one that disturbed investigators the most, was that something about the case was still missing. Despite Daniel's partial confession and the evidence found in the landfill, the prosecution struggled with the absence of a body. She began reviewing Alicia's past again, this time with fresh eyes. Something about Alicia's cold detachment unnerved her. It was as if the disappearance of her partner meant nothing. No grief, no rage. Just calculated statements and a convenient loss of memory. While looking into Alicia's old addresses, Lena discovered that she had once lived in Tennessee under a different last name. There, she had briefly dated a man named Joel Carter, also an accountant, also soft-spoken, and also reportedly vanished after their relationship ended. Without physical remains, they had no definitive proof of death, no cause, no manner, no time. Just a landlord who said one day Joel packed up and left without a word. Police in Tennessee had filed it as a voluntary disappearance. But Lena couldn't ignore the pattern. Quiet men. Long-term partners. Sudden exits. She contacted Tennessee authorities and requested files on Joel's case. The report was thin, no foul play suspected, no searches conducted, just an assumption that Joel had moved on. But Lena found a detail that chilled her. Joel had sent an email to a friend the night before he vanished. In it, he mentioned that he had been having doubts about whether the child Alicia was pregnant with at the time was his. He had made an appointment for a DNA consultation. Prosecutors pushed forward, but privately, they knew the case was fragile. Juries are hesitant to convict without a body. Doubt lingers. It creates space for defense arguments and shadows even the strongest circumstantial evidence. Detective Lena Hartman remained obsessed with the case. She wasn't satisfied with the version of events Daniel had given. His timeline didn't fully match phone data. There were gaps in his story, 20-minute periods he couldn't explain. More importantly, he never gave a clear answer about the body's final location. He claimed they left Nathan at the landfill, but when pushed for details, his answers were vague. He couldn't recall where in the landfill they dumped the tarp. He didn't remember which direction they drove in afterward. It was as if he was either protecting Alicia or lying to protect himself. Alicia continued to deny involvement. Her story never changed. She told the court she had nothing to do with what happened and claimed Daniel must have acted alone after Nathan confronted her. In her version, she had stepped outside with the baby, leaving Nathan in the garage. She said when she returned, Nathan was gone. She assumed he had left in anger. According to her, Daniel arrived minutes later. She claimed he had seen her crying and offered to stay the night. She maintained she had no idea a crime had occurred until the police came asking questions weeks later. But surveillance footage from a gas station just outside the neighborhood placed both Alicia and Daniel in the truck the morning after Nathan disappeared. The defense pushed hard. Daniel's attorneys argued that he was coerced into confessing. Meanwhile, Lena expanded the investigation's scope. Joel had never been reported missing. He had no close family. Lena felt her stomach turn. Back in Georgia, Lena obtained a search warrant for Alicia's old storage unit 1 that had been closed for years but never emptied. This discovery changed everything. It revealed a pattern of manipulation and secrecy, casting Alicia in an even darker light. At the pretrial hearing, both Alicia and Daniel pled not guilty. Still, without a body, the jury would have to rely on inferences and circumstantial connections. As the trial approached, Lena felt the weight of time pressing down. That answer, still hidden beneath silence and lies, remained the final piece of a puzzle that refused to fall neatly into place. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as the trial of Alicia Monroe and Daniel Mercer began. The air was tense, the stakes high, and the absence of Nathan Reed's body hung over the proceedings like a dark cloud. They showed the timeline, his login at 8:14 p.m., the paternity test showing a 0% match, and the sudden disappearance that followed. They introduced Nathan's Google searches about legal responsibility, his burner email, and the hidden test result file titled Caleb_test_confirmed, PDF. Then came the forensic evidence, bloodstains in the garage, a tarp soaked with his DNA and landfill fabric matching the clothes Nathan had worn. A man caught in Alicia's trap, emotionally entangled and afraid to say no. They acknowledged he helped dispose of something, but suggested he believed it wasn't a body, trash, maybe. A cover-up of a heated argument that had spiraled out of control. But a premeditated murder? Never, they claimed. And if Daniel didn't see a body, how could the jury say for sure that Nathan was dead? Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the hallway outside was packed with reporters. No murder weapon had been found. The cause of death was still unknown, and there was still no body. But the pile of circumstantial evidence had grown too large to ignore. Witnesses testified about Nathan's character, how responsible he was, how much he adored his child, how unlikely it would be for him to walk away without saying a word. Alicia Monroe was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice, though the jury was split on first-degree charges. No body had been recovered. No grave had been found. Nathan Reed's final moments remained a mystery. The sentence brought accountability, but not closure. She was sentenced to 28 years without parole, no media, no cameras, no spectacle. Just a small headstone and the long-overdue silence of justice, finally laid to rest. Conversations about not letting him find out, about starting over, and the ominous phrase, "He'll ruin everything if he talks." She visited the landfill one final time, walking the same path searchers had taken, trying to imagine where else the truth might be hidden. She believed Nathan had never made it out of the garage alive. She believed his body had been discarded like trash. But a part of her still hoped they would find him, if not for justice, then for peace. With it came a flood of emotions, relief, sorrow, and fury. The case was officially closed. But for those who had followed it from the start, the ending came with no celebration. Just a sobering reminder that sometimes the cruelest betrayals don't come from strangers, but from those closest to us. Though no names were attached in the text, the timing and context were damning. Caleb was adopted by a distant relative of Nathan's from another state, and his name was changed quietly to protect him from the story that surrounded his infancy. Tucked in a hidden folder were several images taken the morning after Nathan vanished. Inside were human remains wrapped in black plastic, along with fragments of clothing and a single silver watch engraved with the initials NRDNA confirmed what Lena had always suspected. Most showed nothing but trees and roadways, blurry and rushed. But one photo taken accidentally captured the inside of Daniel's truck bed. In it was a tarp, dark and folded, with what looked like a stain spreading beneath it. The image was grainy, the details unclear. But when enhanced and compared to the tarp found in Alicia's garage, the material and creases were a match. It was the closest thing investigators had to placing Nathan's body in that truck. The implication was clear. Alicia had kept secrets before, and there was precedent to believe she would again. The forensic team explained the blood spatter and DNA evidence in technical detail. The landfill worker who remembered the black truck testified, as did the elderly neighbor who saw the vehicle outside the house the night Nathan vanished. She had chased this case longer and harder than most detectives ever do, but she also knew how fragile a case like this was. The missing body was a hole the defense could climb through over and over again. They argued that bringing up Joel Carter, her ex-boyfriend, who had disappeared years earlier, was unfair and prejudicial. But the judge allowed it, noting that the patterns were too similar to ignore. 2 men, 2 suspected paternity issues, 2 disappearances. Though Joel's case had gone cold years ago, the inclusion of his story cast a deeper, more sinister light on Alicia. Every morning, spectators lined up hoping for a seat, eager to witness the unraveling of one of the town's most disturbing mysteries. They insisted Nathan had left of his own will, overwhelmed by the discovery and betrayed by someone he trusted. The blood in the garage, they claimed, could have come from a minor injury. The landfill materials were conveniently vague. And Daniel's confession? Coerced and self-serving, they said, designed to minimize his own punishment by pointing a finger at Alicia. The prosecution called it a cold-blooded conspiracy, a calculated cover-up fueled by betrayal. The defense called it a tragic misunderstanding, stitched together by assumptions and circumstantial claims. The prosecution opened with the central question: why would Nathan Reed, a man with no history of instability, vanish on the exact night he received devastating paternity results? Lena Hartman sat near the prosecution team, observing everything. Though her part in the investigation was mostly over, she remained emotionally invested. Alicia's attorney emphasized that very point. Without a body, they argued, there was no conclusive evidence of death. Daniel's attorney, in contrast, focused on painting him as a manipulated accomplice. The trial dragged on for 3 weeks. But it was the messages found on the burner phone in Alicia's storage unit that truly rattled the courtroom. The prosecution read them aloud. The defense tried to dismiss the Tennessee connection as irrelevant. Still, the final blow came not from testimony, but from a series of photos retrieved from Daniel's old phone, recently recovered from a backup drive. The jury deliberated for 6 days. The weight of the decision was immense. Daniel Mercer was found guilty of accessory to murder, obstruction of justice, and improper disposal of human remains. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison. The town exhaled, but the victory felt muted. Months passed. Alicia and Daniel were transferred to separate prisons. Media coverage faded. Detective Lena Hartman never fully let go of the case. A year later, a construction crew clearing land near an old quarry 15 miles outside town discovered a shallow grave. It was Nathan Reed. The final piece of the puzzle had surfaced, silently and without warning. Nathan's remains were buried in a quiet ceremony attended by his sister and a few close friends.